Hi everyone, welcome to the 9th History Bites of 2021. Today's episode is called History Bites from Trailblazers to Changemakers 2.0. My name is Emma Tennier-Stuart and I'm a Visitor Experience Assistant here at Guelph Museum. History Bites is a 1-hour-long casual conversation during which we chat about the latest news, exhibitions, and other happenings at Guelph Museums. Join us on Facebook Live on the third Wednesday of every month at noon. A recording of today's History Bites will be available through the Museum Everywhere portal on our website and on our social platforms after the live broadcast. Before we get into today's episode, I would like to focus our thoughts within an awareness and acknowledgement of the land. Guelph is located on the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples, specifically the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Guelph is one of 6 present-day municipalities on land governed by the Between the Lakes Purchase No. 3 Treaty of 1792, an agreement between the Mississaugas of the Credit and the British Crown. Today, Guelph is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Guelph Museums commits to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action and to doing more to learn, share, and support truth and healing. When we started the History Bites series, we spent time in close conversation about the land, its history, and its peoples. We continue to grow our knowledge and our relationships with our treaty partner, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and with the many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who call Guelph home today. This informs all that we do at the museum and underscores our commitment to each other today and for the health and well-being of future generations. So last September, Guelph Museums launched Her Story, Trailblazers of Guelph and Wellington County, which was both a digital exhibition and a physical display in the Guelph Civic Museum. The exhibition celebrated the trailblazing stories of local women, including artists, activists, caretakers, healthcare workers, mothers, politicians, scientists, and writers, as well as women-led organizations. Since then, we have had 2 Trailblazers-themed History Bites episodes. One last October, talking with several of the community researchers for the Her Story exhibition, as well as with some of the Trailblazers themselves. And one this past July, speaking with members of the community who nominated their own Trailblazers, along with some of those nominees. You can watch both of these episodes on our YouTube page, our Facebook page, or the Museums Everywhere portal on our website. We had such a fantastic response to our call for community nominations that we weren't able to fit all of our nominees into one conversation. So for today, for Trailblazers and Changemakers 2.0, we're finishing up that conversation. Using a slightly different format than usual, you'll see me chat first with Kathryn Greenaway, who nominated her aunt, Florence Isabel Greenaway, a pioneering nurse, and then with psychotherapist and disability rights activist, Alina Kislenko. A quick note on the gender parameters. Her Story was inspired by the Canadian Federation of University Women and was intended to highlight the historic and ongoing achievements of women in Guelph. The project aimed to share the stories of cisgender women, trans women, two-spirit and gender non-conforming people, and to recognize the historical barriers faced by all women. We acknowledge that Black, Indigenous, and people of color and 2S LGBTQIA+ women have faced and continue to face even greater barriers. Now, if you watched July's History Bites, you'll already have seen some snippets of my interview with Kathryn Greenaway. In the extended interview that you're about to see, you'll hear more great anecdotes from the very storied life of Florence Greenaway, a truly wonderful example of a woman who was working and living well ahead of her time. After that, in my interview with Alina, you'll hear Alina talk about the process of founding the ADHD and Spectrum Center here in Guelph, as well as her work to found the Women Trailblazing Fellowship. She talks about the way that autistic people and people with ADHD can be their own best advocates in a neurotypical world. So now, on to the first interview.
Thank you so much for making the time to do this today, to talk about your nominee for the Trailblazers and Changemakers project. So could you please just quickly introduce yourself and then give a very brief introduction to the life of Florence Isabel Greenaway?
Yes, I did not grow up in Guelph, but my family came to Guelph in 1857. My grandchildren are 7th generation Guelphites. I came back here after my parents, we moved to the States, then they moved to Switzerland and Australia. And anyway, the whole family ended up back here. And actually, my brother is in Guelph, and so am I. So I mean, we've all come home to roost, and my grandchildren also live here. My aunt was a remarkable person, I think, for her time, because she was born in 1909. And in those days, she always used to tell me, you know, women had a choice until they married to be a nurse, a teacher, work in an office. You couldn't have, it would be difficult, I think, to have a career and a family. Society was just not set up for that at the time. And she chose, very specifically chose to have a career. She chose nursing. She was passionate about it, and most especially public health. And I think considering what we've been through in the last 18 months or so, I have thought about her a great deal, that this would have been her bailiwick, you know. She was born in Guelph. She went to GCVI. She did her training at Western Hospital, and she left there in 1929. And by that time, and I've seen yearbooks from GCVI with these innuendos about my aunt and a man named Ed, I think. That there was a romance going on there, but anyway, she chose not to pursue that. She graduated in 1929. She went on to University of Toronto and McGill to do her BSCM. And then she did public health in Timmins and in Windsor. But Timmins, I mean, in those days was really the back of beyond. And I remember stories that she would, the physician in that area was often indisposed. And she went into many homes to deliver many babies, not knowing how to speak. It was mainly Italian. She had some just great stories. It almost sounds pioneer-like, you know. Anyway, I wanted to get my dates right. She opened up the Walkerton District Public Health Unit, and then she went on a Kellogg fellowship from McMaster University to do her MSc in nursing at Wayne State Hospital in Detroit. And in 1952, she joined the faculty at McMaster School of Nursing, and she was there for 16 years. She retired in 1968 because she did not want to be the director of nursing when they moved into the huge medical center. When I used to visit her down there in the summertime, she was in Hamilton Hall, I think it was. McMaster campus was gorgeous. It was covered with vines and beautiful old buildings. And the School of Nursing was very prestigious in Canada. And a very, very close faculty of women there. I met all of them. They were so supportive of one another. And I've got to say about Florence, she had friends, men and women from, well, I think when she died at Guelph General, she was surrounded by people from age 16 to 92. And we were all around her. She was a big supporter of the hospitals, both in her efforts and financially. She died at Guelph General. She had been on the board of commissioners of Guelph General. It really came full circle. And she was very passionate about women having careers. She was very committed to the field of nursing. she was, when she came back here for retirement, she was the librarian for the School of Nursing for Conestoga, but at that time that was housed up near the hospital. But she just kept busy all the time. And she always joked that she wanted to come back to retire and be a venerated old lady. So I used to call her a VOL.
What a great goal for us all. That's wonderful.
And I've heard so many people after she died in 1990, on a Friday, just before dark, because I said to everybody she wouldn't want people to be going home in the dark. She, excuse me. Anyway, but I think I have so many favorites for it. Oh, I was going to say that people have told me after she died, both men, women, all ages, they never made a major decision without talking to her first.
Wow.
And these were people from all walks of life, you know, university professors, physicians, and when all through school, for me, I could never write a paper without talking to her because I have such writer's block. I don't know how I got a doctorate, but I would talk to her and she would say, it might be 2 o'clock in the morning. She'd say, okay, you're ready to write, go do it. And I go do it. She did that with so many people. When I went on staff in 1980 at Homewood, I called her one day, disillusioned, and I said, my goodness, I think my job here is protecting people from physicians. And she said, welcome to healthcare. That was a joke. She didn't have anything against them, really, but it was funny. Although my favorite parting story with her was she, in January of 1990, she said to me, you know, I'm not a religious person. I said, absolutely, I know that. She said, but I'll tell you, there's something that I can't know here. I have to get there, wherever there is. Well, that was, and so in June, she went into hospital. And my friend was the director there, Wendy Ewens, and I said to Wendy, she's going to die. And Wendy said, no, she's not. It's a kidney thing. That, you know, no. I said, yeah, she is. I know her. And she's decided, and that's in the family. She's decided this is it. She's going. And Wendy called me at my office the next day, and she said, what you said is true. You better get up here. And up I went. The day before, I had gone to see her when she was first admitted. And her two friends, both had been on faculty at McMaster with her, came out of the room. And they said, oh, Dr. So-and-so, I won't say his name, is in to see her now. And I said, oh, and how is Dr. So-and-so now? And they said, oh, you know him. And I went in and I said, what did you say to Dr. So-and-so? She said, I asked him if he could tell me the medical ethics of his visit. And I said, I bet he was expecting some frail little old lady. And she said, well, he didn't get it. I asked him the medical ethics of his visit, and I said, what do you mean? She said, I haven't seen my own doctor, and he comes in, and he says, I'm just here to talk to you about surgery. So I said, I'm not here to have surgery. I'm here to die. You can go now. And he scuttered out of the room. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
The next day, I went up and I went into her room and she says to me very clearly, she said, now, Kathryn, if you have anything to say, you better say that now. So, you know, I said my piece because you kind of did what she told you to do. A little while later, I was down in Wendy's office and they called us up, and the nurse there said that she had said, go and get Kathryn and Fran and the others. She said, not for my sake, but for theirs, because I'm someplace else. And she didn't talk again. Anyway, and I sat, and all these people came in ICU. They just kept coming, not like they do today, but, and I slipped her Western ring off her finger and have worn it ever since.
Oh, wow.
She was just a remarkable woman, and so ahead of her time in terms of race and gender and sexual preference. I mean, she would talk openly about these things, and she just she didn't care what you did or who you loved, or it was who you were. And I can't admit, she's without a doubt the most influential person in my life. I like to think I'm somewhat like her. I certainly am in terms of humor. Yeah.
She sounds like a force of nature.
And they at McMaster, they used to call her Flossie Nightingale behind her back. And she said her hardest lecture was always teaching public health and outdoor privies.
That would be difficult, yes.
And some of her friends, as I say, she had friends from so many different ages. Some of her friends are still here. They are now in their 70s. And some of them were on faculty at Conestoga when she was just a mentor and a teacher to so many people. So anyway, I have contacted some of those people, and they are absolutely delighted because they always wanted me to write a book about her. And, you know, I have writer's block, so I can't write anything. So anyway.
Sounds like you have all the material, though. My goodness.
I do. I do.
For the rest of this project, we've really been focusing on contemporary people, but a big part of the focus has been like these lineages of mentorship and of impact that people have had on each other. So it's really wonderful to have you speaking about someone from an older generation and just thinking about how she lives on in so many people here. That's extraordinary.
Yeah. I still today will walk downtown, I mean, before COVID, and people will say, Greenaway, are you related to Florence?
Wow.
Yes, she's my aunt. And I mean, she's been very influential in my career. I mean, I have been a career person, and a great joy was when I had my son. I insisted on going to McMaster, and he was born in 1984. And when I went down on Friday to have him, I was walking with my husband, and we went down in those days wherever how it was configured. We went down to the floor where the School of Nursing was, and it was Friday night, so it was closed. But I looked in the window, and there was her picture in the waiting room with Alma Reed, and there's still a fund, the Reed Greenaway Nursing Fund at McMaster. And anyway, Eric was born at McMaster, and the first person, my mother was not happy about it, but Florence came down, bustled into the room, and she says, let me get him feeding. I said, oh, okay. And she just took over, and she said, there wasn't a baby at Western Hospital who wouldn't feed for me. And I said, were you an obstetrics nurse? And she said, yes. Well, I didn't know that. about her then. Anyway, she did. And she was with my mother when I was born, when my brother was born.
Oh.
Anyway, and she had great influence. And when she left McMaster, they replaced her with two people, and one of them had a doctorate in nursing. She would have had that, but there was no such degree when, but to get an MSc in at that time for women was unusual.
Absolutely.
Certainly was done, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how she came about this great drive and energy? Was it how did this amazing woman come to be? Just it was who she was?
Well, she had an amazing mother,
Mm.
who was the only grandparent I ever knew. She had, it was just she and my dad and the family. And she said she was very, very close to her dad. I didn't know him. He died quite a while before I was born. I think my grandmother was a pretty independent woman too. And she had a great relationship with both of them, but another of my is a family of storytellers, and I've been quite surprised in the past year. Such a family of storytellers, way back generations. I mean, family jokes go on when you don't even know the people who started it, but they, like my son will say, if I say to him, somebody's a silly thing, he'll say, just watch your language, Mom. I mean, the silliest, it has a long story. And for such a family of storytellers, there is not one story about the 1918 pandemic. Not one story. And I had a great uncle, my aunt's uncle, who died here in Guelph from the flu.
Wow.
And the only story was, oh yeah, he died in the flu. But nobody ever said anything about that. But I do know that probably from Florence, she said she was not interested in the in being married and being constricted to a home. Later in life, she said to me, you're fortunate because you get to have it all. And she said, she thought that was wonderful, but that in her day, you had to make a choice,
Yeah,
but,
for sure. And what a choice she made.
She used to also, I remember I came up when I lived in the States, and came up, I was in high school. She was still working, but she'd spend her weekends here with her uncles. And she was mentoring two students from GCVI. Ravi, I remember, he was from India, and Bill, who was from Holland. And they were two foreign students here. And she had them over. I met them. She was just so helpful to everybody. Not in a, I mean, she is a demanding woman. It wasn't that she was a do-gooder and she went around. Not that that's bad, but she made you be clear. You couldn't do throwaway talk. She'd want to know just what do you mean by that. So.
Right.
So it sounds like a very sick thing, but in my family also, death has always been. My father had the funeral home up on the corner of Delhi and Aramasa.
Right, of course.
That's where I was born. Death was part of life. It was not hidden or anything. And because in January 1990, she said, I'm not well. Not well. And we didn't, she didn't appear not well and so forth. The day after she died, my father and I were driving out to the cemetery, and they were very, very close. And he said, I've thought of an epitaph. I said, what? He said, let's have on the stone, I told you I was sick. They were such good friends that it reminds me of my brother and I, because it's just us and we're the same way. So anyway, and he or she was a tremendous influence in my brother's life also.
Yeah.
Yeah. And many others. So a real trailblazer, I would say.
Truly, truly. And I would love to just expand slightly. What do the words trailblazer and changemaker mean to you? What made you kind of think of her for trailblazer?
Well, doing it differently. Just as I say, in her time, so that would, let's say the 20s, when young women were really making those decisions. My own mother was also from Guelph. She was a wonderful vocalist, trained. She sang for Edward Johnson when he came back. He was interested in taking her to New York. And really, when I think of my mother, and I've got her recital picture right up there when she sang for Edward Johnson, that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go to New York, be an opera singer, go to parties, and she didn't have the, whatever it was, the trailblazing quality to say, I'm not going to do what's expected of me. And of course, she had different parents who I never knew. And she married and had a family, and she continued to sing. When we moved to Montreal, she always did the contralto solo in the Messiah every year with the Montreal Symphony, until one year she says she didn't get it and she just expected to get the part. And she said some upstart, Marine Forester or something, got the part. I think she had her unhappiness through her life. But I get older, I can understand it more. I think that's really what she wanted to do, but she couldn't do it. And I think my aunt did it. And they were always the closest of friends, but my mother always, I think, harbored some resentment, especially with my closeness with my aunt and me emulating or following her model rather than my mother's. But
sure.
I think there are those cultural pressures are very strong, and it depends on the family you come from and whatnot. I think my aunt really was somewhat unusual in those days,
And of course,
my mother,
you wouldn't be here if your mother hadn't gone the family route. So
that's right. So I'm grateful for that, and that I had both of them. I mean, they're both very influential, but yeah, the other, my aunt used to sew. That's my passion, is that I sew. I don't write anything unless I can sew something. Like when I'm sewing, it's doing. And my granddaughter, who's 9, said to me yesterday, well, I can sew, And I said, Olivia, I started to sew when I was your age. I said, I am now 75. And I said, my hands just do automatically what they do. I said, you do not know how to sew. And it was also my aunt, when I would spend some summers down there with her in Hamilton, she'd set up a sewing machine in the chemistry lab. And I would sew, and Henrietta Aldershot was the chemistry teacher in the School of Nursing, and she would come in and she taught me how to make bound buttonholes. I mean, it was just the most wonderful group of women. And when I got into women's lib and everything going in the 70s, there was part of, my aunt who said, but women, in her experience, there was no queen bee stuff. I mean, that's what was going on in the 70s, a lot of that. Women being their own worst enemies and whatnot. Her experience was women really together, supportive, whereas my mother's experience was a more traditional women at lunches, trying to outdo one another. So, the stuff we hear, the negative stuff about women. Interesting that I would have. So I thought about, when I went into private practice, I thought about who are the old ladies in my life. And they were primarily my mother, my aunt, Henrietta. I had all these wonderful old ladies that for me have shown the way. And I very much wanted to be that myself, and I feel like I've joined that illustrious group. So
it sounds like it. Well, we are running out of time. I feel like I could talk to you all day, and I feel like I could hear about Florence all day. My goodness, she's amazing. But I'll stop recording here. So thank you so much for that. Hi, Alina. Thank you so much for joining me today for this History Bites conversation about Guelph's Trailblazers and Changemakers. So I'll just ask first. Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. So can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, let's see. So my name is Alina Kislenko. I'm an assistant clinical professor adjunct at McMaster Medical School. I also run the ADHD and autism, the ADHD and Spectrum Center in Guelph and now in Ottawa. And also run the Women Trailblazing Fellowship, which is a not-for-profit that helps women in currently Greece and Indonesia access STEM, like sciences and stuff like that, and also business skills. So yeah, we do a lot of things, and I think partially because I am ADHD and autistic myself, I get bored a lot, and then we build and build and build.
Amazing. Can you tell us the story of how you came to found the ADHD and Spectrum Center? How did that come about?
Yeah. So I was actually in undergrad, and I was in a pilot project called the Procrastination Support Group. I was like just barely diagnosed with one of my ADHD diagnoses, but then later we figured out it was autism too, which is a very common journey for a lot of women or femme presenting people. And so because there's loads of underdiagnosis for us with ADHD and autism, if we get either. We often don't get the other one if it counts, and many people actually have both. But anyway, and so I came out of it and I was like, okay, I need help. I was in this great program. This was super fun. And they were like, oh yeah, the program's done now. And also now that you're not a student, because I graduated, they're like, there's just nothing in Guelph to help you. There's nothing. And I was like, this sucks. So So then, and I was 22 at the time, and I was just like, but I'm trying to set up my life, figure things out. This anyway. So I ended up running a support group I started for ADHD people, adults with ADHD, and then it ended up being ADHD and autism. Because I learned, oh, okay, it's really similar, and I have both, and like let's connect. And people, ADHDers and autistics get along amazingly. Anyway, so yeah, started that, and then there was just a lot of demand for, hey, wait, there was just no services, there was just nothing anywhere, especially nothing run by anyone who was neurodivergent themselves. So I actually saw therapist after therapist for myself that was like, there was a lot of ableism, there were a lot of problems, they were giving me awful advice that wasn't working for me. And then eventually I was like, okay, like the ADD and autism group was doing amazingly, and everyone kept asking for stuff. So at first I became a coach for specializing ADHD and autism, and then I ended up getting my like graduate degrees and all the other things in the specialty. And yeah, and then now we're essentially the most ADHD and autism friendly town in Canada, because we have like a center that we do diagnosis. Now we specialize in like female diagnosis as well, because it's so uncommon. We have a special, we work specifically also so much with trans clients and LGBTQ populations, because they're not often caught, and all of our practitioners are ADHD or autistic ourselves. So there's, and we now connect with the universities and everything. And yeah, so the town is now very different, thank goodness.
Had there ever been any question of you leaving Guelph? Like just in terms of, I mean, did you grow up here? Were you really, really committed to making Guelph the place?
I was raised in Thornhill. Well, I was born in Ukraine actually, and came to Canada as a refugee when I was 2. But then I hate the suburbs. We were in like Thornhill. It was all concrete, and I was so happy to go to Guelph, University of Guelph, and just like get away from like York University and all the cement. And then once I got here, I was like, this is my town. I love it here. People were so much more open to mental health, very LGBTQ friendly, very like just a lot of open-mindedness and thinking through things, very science positive. So, and it's like, it's just the perfect size of a town. So I don't know that I'll live here forever, but definitely our counseling centers will be here forever. And then, but we've also had so much demand from around the world for this kind of service, because it's very hard for a lot of ADDers and autistics to become therapists or to do these types of things. So yeah, so who knows? We've been exploring opening a center in Indonesia and some other places.
That's amazing. That's really cool. From the get-go, I mean, I clearly it was a bit of a process that kind of kind of evolved as it went. But did you always intend to strictly only hire people with ADHD or who were autistic?
It was originally, it was just me, and then I got so overloaded with clients, and I had like a 6-month waiting list, and I was like, this is awful, like I need to give them better care. And luckily, actually, my husband, we met in our graduate studies. He also is autistic and ADD, and we were like dating at the time, and we were like, do you want to come to Guelph? You're also a practitioner who can do this. Like, I'll train you in ADHD and autism, but like you'll get it. And so I imported him from Ottawa, and this is why our other location's in Ottawa, because he's from there. and then he started, and it was like such a learning curve for him to like just change from regular clients. But then he just was like, this is so great. Like, I get the clients, we get each other so well. And then we were like, yeah, only if as much as possible, we need to only hire neurodivergent therapists. And then that's been a wild ride too, because a lot of neurodivergent therapists come to us from these awful work environments that were super ableist and really hard on them and didn't believe any of their needs. And so that's actually a big focus we take when we bring in our neurodivergent practitioners, which, by the way, we're hiring for psychotherapists and social workers, and probably will be for a long time. But when we bring them in, we have like okay, it's not just training them on the work. It's like dealing with so much trauma that comes from their other workplaces, teaching them to like ask for their needs, teaching them like it's okay to be this way, you don't have to hide. Like, it's a whole process. And we learn, like, if we take care of our practitioners and help them like blossom, they're just obsessed with our clients, giving them the best like service. Like, they think about it all day long. How can I help my clients? As long as they're doing well, like, we're so inner driven to this work. Yeah, so that's been a cool discovery. Take care of our therapists, they will obsessively take care of our clients.
Do you know of anywhere else that is doing that has that kind of role?
I think there are some ADHD specialized places where there are like some coaches that specialize in ADD and they have it themselves. Like it is a bit more common in the ADHD world, but in the autism world, like no. And in the together world of ADHD and autism, as far as we know, we're the only center like this in the entire world, which makes sense. We've got like universities and look like not-for-profits and things like asking us to speak all the time. Like in a couple months, I'll be speaking at a Swiss university, and I did something with Ionian University in Greece, and then like this is pretty world-blowing. And actually, it led us to develop something that's also becoming kind of a big deal. So because we're neurodivergent practitioners working with neurodivergent clients, we started realizing like why. So a lot of clients are actually, they're like ADD and autistic clients are considered treatment resistant because a lot of the work that is done is not suited to them. So a lot of the psychological profession is like, okay, you've done it wrong, clients, like you're resistant. And what we learned is no, we need to create methods specifically for us, and there's so few of them. So we developed something called the PI model, called the parts inclusion model, which does like really intense like trauma therapy, but makes it really fun and is really ADHD and autism friendly. And now we're actually currently getting it researched. So University of Guelph was part of it, and then University of Toronto now is helping us research it. And because this is kind of a big research, a method that seems to be much healthier than like the current one, especially for autistics, which is ABA therapy, which is actually seen in a lot of the autism field as quite abusive. So we've been really working on making an alternative that's very much about the inner world of the autistics and ADDers and focusing on the huge load of trauma we get, much more than average. And then we're finding huge results very quickly in clients. So yeah, anyway, so that's kind of a cool thing that came out of it, of us being like, wait, our clients aren't treatment resistant, like, because we're not treatment resistant. Just like my therapist thought I was treatment resistant, that's not the right way.
That's so exciting. I love that it's not just that the center itself is trailblazing for the way that you practice your therapy and coaching, but now you're going to be able to kind of share that and really, really hopefully change things for the better. That's so amazing.
Yes, and we need a lot of change. So much ableism, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. To pivot now to your other endeavor, I'm sure one of many other endeavors. So for your Women Trailblazing Fellowship, you said the short version was that you got bored and wanted to start something new, which is very relatable. I'd love to hear kind of the longer story. Tell me more about it and why you founded it.
Oh, sure. So, okay, so I realized as the center was doing well and I had more time to think, okay, what do I want to do in my life? Like the practitioners are doing well, the clients are doing well, like what else can I do in the world or whatever. And I was finding that I really, for my own mental health, I need to leave Canada often in the winters because, and this is true for a lot of ADDers and autistics, but climate is a huge deal for us. And so I was traveling to these different places, like the Philippines, Indonesia, and Greece and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'm just feeling like a tourist. I want to be contributing. And so many people were also asking a lot about ADHD, autism, psychology, but also business skills. Because I kind of built a business out of nothing without really like business skills and stuff like that a long time ago. I love helping, especially women or people who identify as women, build their own businesses and get over these obstacles, because oftentimes men are really encouraged to like make mistakes and take chances and do whatever, but women are often more encouraged to be safe, and like if you have a failure, that just proves you're not suited for it and you should stop and whatever. So anyway, I really enjoy that. So what ended up happening was before I went to Indonesia, this one trip, I ended up just reaching out and being like, is there any orphanages or different not-for-profits we could work with where we can come in and figure out like, what do you want? Because we didn't want to do a white savior thing, like what service would you want? And we can actually find people locally in your community to come teach the girls and people identify as female at the orphanages. And so we got a response, and so we came in and we ran a pilot program there, which was so great. We had about 25 girls who we taught them STEM, and we gave them a lot of tech training. We got them access to laptops. We got them a lot of different programs. It was super exciting. And then we were like, Great, that worked. And then I found like an amazing bunch of local women to help support this, and they would come in and teach in like the language of, you know, the people at the orphanage as well. And I would just be more of a consultant, like helping them, making sure that they're like that we're organizing them and getting them in at the right times and meeting everyone's needs. Because like what's been being found a lot in the not-for-profit world is not so much that they need more not-for-profits, but more they need people organizing the resources that already exist in the country. You know, there's already so many helpers, people with knowledge, educated people, and they just need them to come in and help. So that's what we also did in Greece. We went and worked with Ionian University and found a lot of local people there who are willing to teach the women or again, people that identify as women at the university. And so we taught them these skills. And then the plan was they went and they would teach at the local high school. So once these women learned these different skills, the STEM and business skills, they would go out and teach at the high schools. And there's a big poverty problem in Corfu. So it was just like, we want to teach them and help them support. And then keep supporting one another. And then the women who were coming to teach, we would even get them mentorship training internationally from like these other women who were willing to help as well. Like, and it was all done predominantly really for free of just people who want to come learn. And then once they've learned, they want to teach. So it was like, I get teary thinking. It was just like a hugely heart expansive process. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so amazing. Do you have anything planned next, or are things kind of on hold with the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. In the pandemic, we had a main person who was like working between like the university and us and like navigating the computer labs and stuff. And they ended up, yeah, like there's just so much stuff going on in their lives. So we're just waiting till things settle down and then we'll explore next steps. But it really, part of why I wanted to do it was because I was like, this is something I know very little about. And I want to do it in a way that's actually equitable and really respectful to the culture. I don't want to be coming in and doing ridiculous things, but I also like want that sharing between like, we have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of knowledge. Can we come together and do those kinds of like those cultural exchange and that knowledge exchange and the research exchange? Because it's a lot harder there to get a lot of access to the sciences. So there's a lot of myths going around. Especially in the psychological world. There, at one point, I did a talk at Ionian University on ADHD, and about like the place could hold about 300 people, and it was packed and with only like everyone standing in the aisles and everywhere. Probably like 500 people showed up, and there was a line like an hour long to come talk to me afterwards because people were like, "Oh my gosh, what if I want to get diagnosed? How do I do this?" And I was like, "You're right. In your country, there's so few options, and that's Greece. Like they're quite developed." But yeah, so it was now also like, how do we help connect resources in the country? How do we work with also the psychologists there? A lot of them are still working under older myths of ADHD and autism, and like things like, oh, you can't have ADHD and still ever do well at school, or you can't have autism and ADHD, or you can't, anyway. So it just the huge need, like even just in Canada, so much need for ADHD, autism stuff in the world. Like we are so ahead of the curve here in Canada, even learning about this stuff, even being open to it existing. So yeah, so there's going to be a lot more next steps for what to do, because there's just so much demand internationally, and I'm almost trying to think, like, how do I meet it? I don't know.
You're one person doing so much.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
I love that though. It's a model for how to use your privilege without imposing your privileged background. That sounds fantastic.
It was, I had to face a lot of stuff inside of myself. I'm like, what is even the urge to do this? Like what kind of weird racist crap is in here? Like, what am I? Yeah. So there's a lot of, and even still every step I do, I'm like, is this the right way to talk about what I'm doing? Did I, am I infantilizing them? Yeah. So there's just a lot of, cause I don't want to treat them the way the world treats, ADHDers or autistics or, refugees, or, it's like, no, like we're all human. How can we work together? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I was actually wondering, I think you had an experience you shared a little bit, with the center. Is there anything you want to share about that?
I hadn't had anything prepared, but it has genuinely been life-changing. So I actually went, I think Matt was the first person that I talked to who helped me kind of get my head around the idea of having ADHD. And then I went for coaching with Kate for I think almost a year. And honestly, it's helped so much to be able to think about how I think, I guess, and to be open to understanding why I do things certain ways. And it's made everything so much easier. And so it's just been, it hasn't even been that intense for me as I'm sure it is for some people, but just to be given the tools to understand yourself is genuinely life-changing.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear, because I know for me too, like a lot of people describe figuring out you have ADD or autism like putting on glasses. Like
Yeah.
you can see it, like why didn't anyone know this? Why is this happening? You know, so and often people will go through a lot of like anger too, like why didn't people know? Why did my parents miss it? Why did the school system miss it? And then you realize, oh, they miss everybody's. Okay. And then like, well, how do I make my life like more right for me? And then it becomes, how do I help others? You know, there's just there's so much need, there's so much like, and even actually social skills are changing. Like, so they at the center and in general in the world, it was like, oh, autistics need more social skills. And then we're realizing, wait, no, there are neurodivergent social skills and there are neurotypical social skills. And autistics already spend our entire lives learning these neurotypical social skills and are fantastic at them. If we're not in a situation, we can tell you, this is what you should do to be normal right now. Like, this is what, you know, but the moment we're in it, we're like, but it's against my values. These aren't my social skills. Like, I can learn them, but they're wrong. They like, and a lot of neurotypical social skills involve like lying a lot, not really bringing up what's going on, you know, not really talking about what matters, not bringing up your concerns, you know, being passive aggressive, all this stuff. And so now we've learned a lot more. It's like, oh, there's neurodivergent social skills or neurotypical social skills, and maybe should the neurotypicals be learning our social skills sometimes too, as much as we work hard to work theirs, to learn theirs, as especially with ADDers and autistics or something like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15, maybe even up to 20% of all people between the two of them. So yeah, so it's been changed. So yeah. I'm glad you went through that process of just like change. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, as myself a queer person as well, there's a lot of interesting parallels of what gets normalized and not, and we talk about the standard and the other versus two equally valid ways of being. And yeah, so it's I mean it's an easy thing to hyper focus on as well. Like, I love thinking about it anyway. So it's always fun. It was definitely, figuring it out was a happy process of like, oh, this is so cool, this all makes so much sense. It's like when you hear about people getting certain diagnoses and being like, people say, oh, I'm sorry to hear this. And for this kind of thing, it's like, no, this is awesome. This is wonderful.
Exactly. The framing is so big. And there's so many people go around being like, saying, oh, well, you don't, like, they're really upset that people say, oh, you don't look autistic or you don't look ADD. And it's just like weird. And also, or just like, or you look like you're fine. You're super independent. So when you ask for a need, you're just being difficult or, you know, annoying or whatever. And actually, when you think about it, in much of culture, just like actually a lot of queer things are demonized by culture. You know, if a male acts more feminine or whatever stuff, you know, it's demonized very quickly. Also, so many ADHD and autistic traits are just demonized across culture. Like, oh, you're late. Oh, you don't have good values or moral character or something. It's like, that's a huge neurodivergent thing we're working with. We actually have something called time blindness, a lot of us, especially ADDers, where we don't have a sense of time when we like try to have we don't have no internal clock, which in some ways is amazing for when you're creative, because you don't have a clock and like, oh, this is very important to go eat lunch. It's like, no, I should finish this painting because it's more important than lunch. You know, or I should finish hyper-focusing on something and learn about it for 24 hours and become really good at it is more important than lunch sometimes, you know, and sometimes it is, right? Yeah, and just like other things in culture are just seen as like, oh, somebody like being too honest is like, oh, that person's, oh, you don't want to be around them, you know, they're like too brutally honest, or they're just trying to be mean to you. And it's like, no, but in our culture, especially with autistics, being honest is our natural state. We'll happily tell you awful things about us because we accept them. We're like, these are just true facts, you know? And so we get really confused when we bring up true facts about others and people are like, how dare you? I'm like, did you not know? I am so sorry. Are you not aware of this? why? Like, why are you accounting for this variable? Like, yeah, like I'm worried about you. Yeah, so very different norms. And finally, the world's kind of listening to that a bit more.
It really does feel like, I mean, maybe I just spend too much time on social media, but it does seem like more and more people are talking and it is trickling into the mainstream, which
Exactly.
sometimes for subcultures coming into the mainstream is not the best thing. But I think in a lot of ways, this is a good thing.
Big agree.
Um,
I think the Zoomers have it right. The Zoomers, like generation, they're just all of our therapists. We just like sit and go, those Zoomers, man, like, whoa, like what they're doing, they're so ahead of the curve. Like they're figuring out their identities, their genders. If they identify with one, they're figuring out like they're deconstructing everything that looks like, oh, it's tradition, leave it be, but it's like, no, so much of our language has been made from abusive, bigoted places. So much of our norms, our gender norms ruin everyone's lives. Like we have to break this stuff apart. And they're so smart. Like they have the internet, they have all this knowledge, and I'm just constantly blown away, especially by ADHD and autistic Zoomer aged people. They know so much, and they're so deeply researched, and they're more updated than I am in what's going on in like the new research and stuff. Even though I'm like there all day long learning about it, I'm like, you're right, there was that new study. Like take care. So I just and I'm actually even helping right now. I have a mentee who's identifies as neurodivergent and as like non-gendered, and they actually are in the process of making a whole autism chart of like a different way, like because right now it's all autism, but how to identify like what if you're high sensory needs, what if you're high, you have like a lot of learning disabilities with it, what if you're high, you have a need for like wherever you go you have to bring like this mouse and that's like your comfort place. Like how do we identify that and quickly so people know how to meet our needs? So they're in the process of creating like a cool complex chart that we're working on and then might release to the media soon, just as a look, like we've got to figure out a way to do this. And I think the kids are the way forward to figure out like out of this whole mess of we're breaking everything down. I think the kids are like really building things up again. I'm just so excited by what they're doing. So in the future,
well,
as people
perfect.
watch this, so go on.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, like in the future, when people watch this, it's like we have so much hope for the future, and we're trying our best, but we're all just so entrenched in this awful, so much bigotry and just like all these gender norms and things that are just limiting us so hard that we're spending our whole lives getting out from under the trauma that society is just creating for everyone because it's like not a good fit for humans. Like sometimes I feel like we've landed on a planet of like I've landed on a planet of like vegan cats. It's like they're like, and nothing wrong with being vegan, but it's like cats have a lot of trouble being vegan, and so it's like all the cats are like have horrible anemia and they're wandering around the like planet sick, but they have these like religions and these other rules that say no, you can't eat meat, it's evil. And so they're just like, it's like, and you're like, okay, well this doesn't seem built for you, like who built this? It's not how cats work, and so it's like kind of finding, I feel like humans too, we're think about our emotions, to not to try to ignore how we're different from each other, to try to not like need to see these people as a burden and difficult, who are different than others, and it's just we're seeing it all wrong. Like it's diversity, emotions, or expressing yourself, maintaining your childlike identity throughout life, like the part of you that society shouldn't kill, like that creative spark, that's I just look forward to us figuring it out.
For sure. I really like the kind of forward focus of this, and this kind of calls back to the July History Bites episode where we were talking a lot about kind of the lineages of mentorship and impact on the world, and everyone, to a last person, brought up their excitement for the future generations and how they're inspired by the generations that are coming after us, who are doing amazing work, who we're trying not to put too much pressure on to do the work, but really excited about what they're doing.
Please clean our mess.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
But I am also curious, is there anyone who came before you? So you were saying I mean, and you were talking about mentorship through your Women Trailblazing Fellowship as well. So obviously you understand the value of mentorship. Was there anyone who helped you, who helped blaze the trail for you?
Oh, that I did a lot of fighting much of society to get to doing anything. Because even when I want to start a business, everyone was like, no, and don't do it. Do easy
Yeah.
things like that aren't like you can't fail and everything. I was like, and if it, wasn't starting, everyone was like super mean about it. But which is a common experience for a lot of women building businesses, which is why I like helping them. But yeah, there was so I was an awful receptionist a million years ago. I'm the worst receptionist, okay? And I was working at this place and I was screwing up everybody's clients and whatever because I just like it wasn't my hyper focus. I didn't build the system like so I just I was just sucking. And then the owner of the center, so her name is Heather. She was just like, "You're an awful receptionist," but like, but everybody there was like, "But you'd make an amazing therapist. Like, you're so good at that kind of stuff." So they were like, so she created a deal with me, like, "Why don't we rent you out a space? Like, we'll make it really low risk. You can come, like, start seeing clients. Like, just." I'm like, "I don't have all the education." She's like, "You know so much more than everybody else. Just start and like do ADD and autism stuff, just like start and or ADD stuff at the time." And anyway, so that was a huge help, and I've thanked her a lot. It's like I really appreciate that. I was a very bad receptionist, and and I'm like, and it was like kind of right after university. It was just kind of like I don't know what to do. I had a psych degree. It was like, what does it even mean? Yeah. So, but then eventually I got like all the proper education. So it was like, but it's tough being a self learner um like because it takes, and this is actually I do a lot of work with gifted populations as well, like gifted kids and gifted adults, because a lot of them are self-learners, and they're like more diagnosed maybe as gifted when they're younger, but then as they get older there's no supports and you actually shouldn't tell anyone you're gifted or everyone think you're up your own butt. And so like kind of helping them like how do you get those certificates or those things that show actually you're way more skilled, like you're an amazing self-learner. You don't have to go to the institutions where you have to like tackle all the hierarchy and the things that like eat your soul, and like how can you start and show competence. So that's actually something I'm working on as well with gifted populations, of helping them do some tests and things that they can show employers to like and so they can skip over a lot of the things just by showing I have the skills and proving that. So anyway, that's something I was up against as well a lot. Yeah, so I appreciate Heather for seeing that. And I had also another mentor, Mark, who brought me into his counseling center when I was like doing the work kind of in a separate space, and then he brought me into his counseling center, and then that was and he helped me. He's my supervisor in my master's for like to take on clients, so he was amazing. And just really supported like the weird ways I did the work and the new ideas I was creating around it. Yeah, so it was definitely some people have helped me along the way. And also, as for many women are femme appearing people, there is also a huge amount of people that try to hold you back, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was going to ask, like, when you think about those who helped you, does gender come into play? Do other marginalizations come into play? It seems like you've kind of got a little bit across the board.
Yeah, like I mean, for like mentorship is a tough thing. Like I take it super seriously. I have a couple of mentees that I'm just like, how to not crush your spark, because I know at some point, like, it's easy that, like, they might grow and I'd be like, no, don't grow that direction. Like, do what I think is cooler. Don't surpass me, and I know, like, those are things that you really have to fight as a mentor where you're like, no, you want to grow them into what they need to be. And I think it's all like growing a kid because you've got all these magical expectations. It's like, but what will you actually become? What is healthiest for you? And that's been a big focus for me of like in a lot of ways, like until I was a lot older I didn't get a lot of the mentors that I was really craving at the time, because I had really difficult interaction with my family that didn't for a long time didn't believe in ADHD, autism, my queerness, other things like that. And then but then now they're a lot more supportive now, but and there were a lot of teachers I tried to reach out to, and they just like because one of my big strengths is psychology, it just wasn't seen as a real skill. It wasn't even taught as a class till like the end of high school or whatever. So it was just really hard to, and a lot of psychology that you learn in undergrad and in high school is actually a lot more like the history of psychology. So even if you're like good at psychology, it's really hard for someone to notice and take you under their wing until like you're like masters or PhD sometimes. Anyway, so just, yeah, I just know there's a lot of people out there kind of sometimes thinking, well, if I was actually good enough to do things, wouldn't someone have told me I'm great or that I can do it? And often just those people won't appear, and you can kind of become your own mentor and then maybe help others, you know, send down that elevator once you have some energy, you know, from breaking those glass ceilings. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. This just feels like the embodiment of a true trailblazer is what you've experienced. It's fantastic. I had one more question. It's more of a broad philosophical question. It doesn't necessarily touch on exactly what we've been talking about. So if you have any thoughts, great. If not, no worries. But this interview is part of, as I was saying, a women's history project, a project on the history of femme presenting people. Do you have any thoughts on how we should remember and celebrate that kind of history? Should it be any different than history at large?
Oh, it's so tricky now, right? Because it's like, even like the title of my organization, Women Trailblazing Fellowship. What the heck is a woman? You know, a couple years ago when I created it, like 5 years ago, or whatever, it was like, this made sense. And now the new dialogue is, wait, what the heck? What is that? So just like with the ADHD and Asperger Center, it became, wait, no, now we're ADHD and Spectrum Center. And I'm sure in several years, it'll be like some other total different thing. So I guess it's just like, I think really important to like work with the times, to like not try to hold on to like, no, but this is the women's identity and like nobody can break that, or we're doing queer work or whatever. And it's like, but now there might be new language that's really important. There might be, we're including more people, we're realizing other people are facing similar issues. And I think we also need to be really empathetic to people who are like, we created it during this time when this was okay, and now we're trying to grow, but there's a learning curve, you know, we have to change our name or we have to change our focus. And I think there really is a difference in the life experience of femme presenting people and like not femme presenting people within the stigma and bigotry of society. We're not even a minority, but we feel like one. We're half the population or whatever, you know, or more. And we feel like we're just, everything female is seen in society as like less than, is just my experience over and over, and just what you see in the world. And in fact, there's some research that came out that 9 out of 10 people see women as inferior, just like naturally, their instinct. They're just gonna be less knowledgeable, less good, less know what they're doing. By the way, people include women. 9 out of 10 men, women, yeah, other genders, everyone see women as inferior. So there's so much work to do here. And I think it's really important as we change our language and change our focus that we're not just like, oh, let's just open it to everyone, because we have a very, femme presenting people have a very unique experience. And we want to make sure that we're also including, you know, the people of color, because they have very much their own experience within, you know, femme identifying as well as that. So, because, you know, white feminism has been a problem for a long time. So trying to integrate and be really, I forget the word often, but the one where you consider all the different types of bigotry, like ableism and ageism, and, you know,
you're really intersectional about it.
Intersectional. So important. Yeah, because we're still seeing a lot of the movements of advocates who are like, you know, let's say, like anti-misogyny or whatever, they still can be super ableist, you know, or super racist. So it's like, how can we move forwards having that as our big goal and ideal?
For sure.
Changing
that
it,
feels like a wonderful, yes, important. That feels like a great place to leave. I think we've kind of hit our time. Yeah, sorry, my video is lagging a little bit, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't talking over you. Yeah, so I think we've hit our time. I think we've easily filled up a half hour. It's been absolutely wonderful to chat with you. Thank you so much for making the time to do this.
You too. Thank you.
Any last thoughts, or are you good to sign off?
Yeah, if anybody wants more information, we're the ADHD and Spectrum Center. Our email address is contact@adhdinterrupted.com. Our website is adhdinterrupted.com. I know it's only got ADHD in it. We're working on it. And that was from like 10 years ago. Anyway, yeah, so thanks for your interest, and if you're yourself neurodivergent, please reach out, or just, there's so much accessible stuff on the internet now of learning that identity, so much that you can do even without a practitioner at all or paying for anything. And if you're not neurodivergent, hopefully this opens your eyes to this whole other world that we live in that might seem just bad or wrong to you, but it's just a totally different lifestyle. So thank you so much for watching, and people of the future, I'm so excited to see what you're doing.
Hopefully we'll look back on this and see this as a great moment of predicting all the good things to come.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for this time today.
Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for joining us for this month's episode of History Bite. Be sure to tune in next time, Wednesday, October 20th at noon, to see curator Dawn Owen chat with artist Tracy May Chambers about her Hope and Healing art installation at the Civic Museum. This installation itself will be unveiled on September 24th.